Everyone knows about Alexander the Great, right? He was a military genius who led the spread of Greek culture throughout the known world and helped to usher in the Hellenistic period. He's also considered one of history's most famous redheads. But most people don't know that his life was actually full of tragedies. So let's talk about them now. This is the tragedy of Alexander the Great. Alexander III of Macedon was born on July 20th, 356 BC, during the reign of Persia's king Artaxerxes II. His father was King Philip II of Macedon, and his mother was Olympias, the daughter of Neoptolemus I of Epirus. While Alexander was still very young, his parents had him sent to Myasa, a village near the city of Pella, where he would be raised by a man named Leonidas. It's believed that Leonidas was a member of the royal bodyguard and a general of the Macedonian army. If this is true, then Alexander's childhood wasn't as idyllic as we might think, because Leonidas had him trained in the arts of war from an early age, teaching him how to ride a horse, wrestle, use a sword and spear, and even hunt. However, according to Plutarch, Leonidas was more of a father to Alexander than a teacher, and he loved the boy as if he were his own son. Unfortunately for Alexander, his parents didn't love each other as much as Leonidas loved Alexander. In fact, they ended up getting a divorce when Alexander was only 13 years old. This made his childhood pretty miserable. And the bad news just kept coming because soon after his parents split up, Philip married one of his 15-year-old son's teachers named Cleopatra. Now, we don't know exactly what happened, but it seems like Alexander felt that she was the cause of his parents' breakup, and so he hated her with all of his heart. The feeling was apparently mutual because when he turned 14, he heard her mocking him and his sister Cleopatra. He grabbed a sword and snuck into her room at night to kill her. Now, whether or not he actually did kill her is up for debate, but he definitely got in trouble for trying. Philip was so angry that he banished Alexander from the kingdom for 3 years. As far as we know, this was the longest time that father and son ever spent apart. Alexander spent his exile wandering around the kingdom with some friends until his father let him return home. But there's a good chance that these years in exile contributed to his strange behavior later in life, which I'll tell you about later. For now, let's just say that Alexander never really developed a relationship with his father either. Philip finally kicked the bucket in 336 BC after being stabbed by one of his bodyguards at a party. There are rumors that the murder was actually orchestrated by Cleopatra, but we don't have any evidence to back up those claims. Either way, it didn't matter because Alexander was proclaimed king immediately after his father's death, despite the fact that he wasn't even in the country. As you can imagine, Cleopatra was furious about this turn of events and tried everything in her power to prevent Alexander from returning to Macedon. She even sent an army to intercept him while he was on his way home. But when the soldiers saw their new king, they fell down on their knees before him, and the reason for their submission was probably the same reason why everyone else submitted to Alexander. He was tall, athletic, good-looking, and oozed charisma. These qualities combined with his intelligence and ruthless ambition made him irresistible. Sadly, though, Cleopatra wasn't one of his fans, and since she had a lot of political influence, she managed to make Alexander's first few years as king very difficult. His brother, King Perdiccas, and his friend Antipater urged him to get rid of her once and for all. And so when Alexander went to Susa, the capital of the Achaemenid Empire, to receive tribute from its king, Darius III, he left Cleopatra behind in Macedonia with orders not to let her out of the palace. However, while Alexander was away, Cleopatra broke free and went to Epirus to seek refuge with her family. When Alexander returned to Pella, he found out what she had done and decided to take matters into his own hands. He gathered his army and marched all the way to Epirus to bring Cleopatra back to Macedonia. By the end of it all, he succeeded, and as punishment for her betrayal, he paraded her through the streets of Pella while people threw rocks and insults at her. Then he forced her to drink poison and died happy, knowing that his greatest rival was gone. With his internal problems solved, Alexander set his sights on the outside world and began planning his conquest of the Persian Empire. This is what he's best known for. Before he set out on his journey, He visited the Oracle of Siwa in Egypt and asked her to tell him if he was invincible. The answer he received was that no mortal was invincible. Angered by what he perceived as a trick, he drew his sword and prepared to attack her, but she escaped. Fearing divine wrath, Alexander apologized and continued his march to the Egyptian border. On the way, he built the city of Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast in honor of his recently deceased sister. He also founded many other cities during his campaigns, including the one that bears his name in Egypt. By 332 BC, Alexander was in the eastern Mediterranean. He spent a year there conquering the region and clashing with the Persians. But the fighting didn't go very well for the Macedonians, and so Alexander went to Susa to regroup. Here he met with the ambassadors of the Persian king, who offered him a peace deal. The terms included marriage between Alexander and Persepolis, King Darius's daughter, as well as permission to keep all the treasure that he had looted so far. Alexander agreed to the deal, but little did he know that Darius never intended to uphold his end of the bargain. While Alexander was making love to Persepolis, a group of 8 Persian nobles entered the bedroom and assassinated him. Some sources claim that his hot temper got the better of him, and that he started a fight with the group after mistreating the king's daughter, but that doesn't seem likely. Others suggest that Alexander simply walked in on them while they were doing something that he shouldn't have seen. Either way, his death in 323 BC was quick and painless. He was only 32 years old. When his friends and generals gathered around his dying bed, he gave them his iconic ring and told them to give it to his legitimate heir, his son, Alexander IV. However, his will didn't do much to prevent the ensuing power struggle. After his death, the empire was divided between his friends and generals, which marked the end of the Macedonian kingdom. But the splitting of his empire wasn't entirely a bad thing. It led to the creation of the Hellenistic kingdoms of Anatolia, Syria, Egypt, and more, and it brought Greek culture to regions as far away as India and Eastern Africa. But that's a topic for another video. Now, while Alexander the Great was undoubtedly a great leader and a great conqueror, it would be a mistake to think that he was perfect. According to Plutarch, he was short-tempered and vengeful. He chained women to chariots like horses and whipped them as they pulled him around. He hosted feasts inviting 8 men of only one type, bald, short, or fat. He chained a man to a chariot like a horse and whipped him as he pulled him around. And he killed anyone who smelled bad. He had a weakness for expensive garments and jewelry. He chained a man to a chariot like a horse and whipped him as he pulled him around. And he drowned a poet in wine for insulting him. He chained a man to a chariot like a horse and whipped him as he pulled him around. I hope you enjoyed learning about the tragedies of Alexander the Great. If you did, please consider liking this video and subscribing if you haven't already. And if you want to watch another video right now, click the link on screen. Thanks for watching. See you next time.